Under Dr. Birol's leadership, the IEA has become a strong advocate for carbon reduction policies. Now, in recent years, the World Energy Outlook has always included a scenario that demonstrates how climate targets can be achieved. In this year's 2017 World Energy Outlook, this sustainable scenario also shows how energy accessibility targets can be met. We very much look forward to hearing about those things. This is being recorded. It's going to be on the Grantham Institute's YouTube channel, and if anyone wants to do any tweeting, you can do that. Hashtag is Grantham10, I believe. That's okay for you? Please do tweet away if you wish. And as I said, very much look forward to hearing what you have to say. Plenty of time for questions and things afterwards. Fatih, thank you.
So, very good evening, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a great pleasure to come back to Imperial College to discuss with you how we see the global energy markets and the related issues, investment, climate change, and new technologies. Before we go to the global energy scene, I should tell you that as International Energy Agency, I mean, many of you know we are based in Paris. We have 300 very bright energy experts. One of them is with me, Simon Bennett. He's from this very Imperial College. And one of the pillars of the World Energy Outlook team, just you mentioned, is here, Dan Dorna, worked many years with the World Energy Outlook, and also we have the editor of the World Energy Outlook here, Edmund Hoska, makes everything readable for the people, and we write the World Energy in a technical way, but what we want to see is that everybody should have access to that information, and Edmund is extremely helpful in that respect. We also, every year, we have students coming and working with us from Imperial College, different parts of the agency, on the technology side, investment, renewables, different parts of the agency, and we benefit from their dynamism, their enthusiasm, and they, I think, also benefit working with the IEA, meeting several experts working in the IEA, and throughout our meetings with the experts from different parts of the world, from the Americas, from Asia, Europe, and elsewhere. So we we are very interested to work even closer with the Imperial College, and we, as the IEA, benefit from this relationship. And me personally, as I said several years ago, I will be always here when you invite me, so hopefully next year I come again. And one of your colleagues told me that this July you are organizing a major event here, and I will be very happy to come if, of course, invited. So let me tell you a few things, what we think, and every time when I come here, I say a few things, but I enjoy a lot the questions that I get from the colleagues. Most of them are unexpected questions, which are even more interesting. Let me start, if I can, with my slides. So since you see a book here from Neil Hurst, I should also make Neil Hurst is one of the colleagues working in the Imperial College, formerly director at the IEA. He wrote an excellent book about the energy conundrum, and I would really like to recommend you to give a look at that. And it is a very nice book covering the international energy governance today and the challenges in front of that. Now, coming back to the global energy markets. If I can tell you one thing about global energy markets, it is changing rapidly, and in a big time. Big changes. There are many changes, but there are 4 of them which we consider as the upheavals of the global energy markets I wanted to bring to attention. What are those 4 upheavals? Number 1. United States. US is becoming the undisputed leader of oil and gas markets for many years to come, thanks to shale revolution. And this has major implications for oil markets, gas markets, prices, geopolitics of energy, energy security, and beyond. Number two, renewable energies, but especially solar power, is becoming cheaper and cheaper, and in many markets in the world, including the emerging countries, it is becoming the cheapest source of electricity generation. As such, the rush for PV, solar PV, is not necessarily primarily driven by environmental reasons, but just for the simple economics of it. And this is a second, we believe, important transformation in the current energy market trends. Third, China, largest energy consumer of the world. China, 10, 15 years ago, China was the country with the strong growth in energy, put its stamp on the coal markets and also oil markets, and oil prices and so on change a lot. But China is now changing its economic and energy policies. Therefore, the world will change. What is the change? Change is the following. China is moving from a heavy industry-based economy to a lighter economy. And in terms of energy and environment, in the last Communist Party Congress before the end of the last year, it was summarized under the motto of making the skies of China blue again by President Xi. It means China is going towards clean energy technologies. This is driven by many factors, but mainly to address the local pollution in the cities rather than climate change. But still helps the environmental causes. And this has major implication. But as of today, even when we talk today, China is number one in solar power in the world, number one in wind, number one in hydropower, number one in electric cars, number one in nuclear power, among other things. But it will be even much more aggressive in the next years to come. And as such, it will have implications on the economics of new technologies. And fourth, for us, the most important trend is the electrification. Electricity demand is growing very strongly. World electricity demand increases 2 times faster than the world energy demand. So we use electricity more and more in the entire economy, in our social lives, together with digitalization and many other end users. And this means that the electricity is eating up the shares of other fuels. It can be oil or gas or coal and others. When you look at the many companies today, oil and gas companies, the so-called the international oil companies, they smell the things very well as well. We see that many of them are finding a significant portion of their strategies in electricity, this or that way. We are seeing this happening. And in the report we published last year, in our investment report, we look at every year how much money is invested in what. It is what Simon is working on with his colleagues. For the first time since several decades, investment went to electricity sector was higher than the investments went to oil plus gas industry. And this will go further in the future. So these are the 4 major upheavals we see that will affect everybody. What is happening in the United States? The shale revolution, oil and gas. The solar PV is becoming cheaper and cheaper, becoming the preferred choice of electricity generation from a point of view of economics. China changing its energy policies and the strategy, and we see the results. And finally, electrification of our societies. And we believe in this context, no country is an energy island. Everybody will be affected from these four major trends. And the fact that, as I said, these transformations are happening so fast and so huge very quickly that the countries, companies, organizations who are not able to read those transformations may well make wrong decisions, policies, strategies, investments. Therefore, we think it is very important to read those changes. Now, one of the things that we people at the IEA who make their hands dirty with data every year, every minute, we see that countries are changing their positions. Countries like, for example, United States. United States has been a major energy importer years and years. And US energy policy, US foreign policy, US defense policy, based on, or at least get an inspiration from the very fact that US is a major energy importer. But it is changing. US is becoming a significant importer of gas and that of oil. This will change many things. Middle East, when we talk about Middle East, the first thing comes to our mind in terms of energy, a major energy exporter. Yes, but at the same time, Middle East is becoming a major energy consumer. Consumption is growing very strongly. Population growth, water desalination needs, economic growth makes the Middle East an important driver of global energy consumption. China has been leading the global energy demand growth, will be still very important, but India is moving slowly but surely to the center stage of global energy affairs. So the country's position in terms of energy are changing again very rapidly. United States. To understand the changes in the US oil and gas, I believe, is very important, not only for the energy people, but for anybody who is watching the television every night, the news, because it's affecting everything. Russia, Europe, Asia, the trends. In the year 2009, this very energy outlook that we have just seen rightly predicted what is happening today. That time we said a silent revolution is happening in United States, and this will have major implications. And we see that that silent revolution became very loud now. The growth of US oil and gas is every year getting stronger and stronger. In terms of oil, United States, either this year, towards the end of this year, or latest next year, becomes the #1 oil producer of the world. Big change. Who could have believed that, except for the IEA? #2, in terms of natural gas, Russia has been the #1 pole position several decades. And last year, US became the #1 gas producer of the world And now, in the next 2 years, the difference between US and Russia will be 30%. US is higher. And this happened, ladies and gentlemen, this is very important. Not only that these trends, this happened only in 7-8 years of time. It's a very short period of time when you think of these issues. Norway, for example, we all know Norway is a major country in terms of gas production for Europe, for UK, and the Norwegian gas production is significant, and it is one of the major producers of the world. And the US only shale gas production, I'm not talking about total gas production in the US, but only shale gas production, which is the efforts of 7-8 years, is now 5 times the Norway. They are producing 5 times the Norway. And these are huge developments, and this will affect everything. What is going to affect? Number one, the production policies of the major established producers. They will be affected. Prices. Some of you may be following the oil markets. I know the Graham is here. He is following the oil markets very, very closely still. Saudi Arabia, other OPEC countries, and Russia came together, made a coalition of those countries to give a push, upward push to prices. But they did. But what happened? As a result of the increase of the prices, more oil came from the United States and now putting again downward pressure on the prices. The oil market dynamics changed completely. Gas markets, the same. US gas, I will come in a minute, but other countries' gas is changing the gas market dynamics and changing the price issues. In terms of energy security, this is a very good news because there are other countries, except for the established producers, bringing oil. Having said that, as I said in the United States several times, our American colleagues shouldn't take these numbers and take it out of proportion. What does this mean? This means the following. US will produce a lot of oil, for sure, but the big chunk of that oil will be used in the US itself for domestic consumption. There will be exports, but exports will be rather limited. Middle East, this is the problem that I want everybody to understand. Middle East is and will remain critical for many, many, many years for the global oil markets as a major exporting region, especially to feed Asian markets, China and India and others. So US oil will be used mainly at home. Exports to rest of the world will go mainly from Middle East. Therefore, developments in the Middle East are still very important. Natural gas and natural gas trade. Every time something happens with Russia, there is an interest in natural gas issues, which is definitely something that we shouldn't forget, the issue of gas security. Today, gas is transported in 2 ways. One with pipelines, the other one with the ships, with LNG, liquefied natural gas. And the bulk of the trade is today by pipelines. But it is changing. And it is changing very rapidly. The share will move mainly in favor of LNG because of what is happening in the United States, I mentioned, but also Australia, Canada, and soon in East of Africa. But Australia and United States will be the 2 main drivers, especially in the next 5 to 7 years, bringing a lot of gas to the markets. And the price expectations are on the moderate side, and as a result of that, most of the trade growth will come from LNG. And this will change the nature of the gas trade worldwide and the gas markets. And gas exporters. currently Russia is, of course, is a cornerstone of the global gas export regime, but US, Canada, Australia are coming very strongly. In addition to the shale gas revolution in North America and Australia, we have the coal bed methane, another unconventional gas resource, and it is bringing a lot of gas to the Asian markets, and it's going to grow substantially. And we see that many new importers, especially Asia, coming in the picture. Only 10 years ago, we have about 15 LNG importers, and in 2 years of time, this will reach to 50. Many countries are seeing this and try to get LNG to create flexibility in their gas markets. So gas is very important, especially when fighting against local pollution and in some cases reducing the CO2 emissions. I mentioned China to you, Chinese energy strategies. This is not only in the Chinese Communist Party statements and so on. It is happening. I give you one number, what happened in the markets. Very impressive. In the Asia-Pacific region, LNG prices until last 6 months were $6. Okay? And Chinese government, after the Communist Party Congress, they said this local pollution in the cities is unbearable. And I can tell this is one of the major problems of the Chinese citizens. We have Chinese colleagues here. They may confirm what I say. And it is really a serious issue for the citizens there. And therefore, Chinese government, with the instruction, they said no more coal heating. And they, especially the cities in the coast, started to import LNG. Okay? This is China, understanding the significance of China. And as a result of that, Chinese LNG imports in a very short period of time increased more than 50%. And as a result of that, $6 prices jumped to $12. So 6 to 12, double. It's incredible. If you think, for example, from one day to another, your salary is multiplied by 2 or divided by 2, it is a big shock in either way. It is like the prices double in a very short period of time. And this is the China effect. We will see the more and more. I will talk about the solar in a moment. Again, the China policies affecting the markets. You will hear more and more China and natural gas markets in the next months to come, but I just wanted to give you a heads up here. And bulk of the Australian gas will go to China, and surprisingly, when you look at the trade discussions between China and US today, between the leaders, recently, very recently, a few weeks ago, China and US companies signed the LNG trade deal. So this also US gas will go to China. So the things are changing as a result of the developments here. Now, renewables, very good news, they are getting cheaper. They are getting cheaper both in terms of wind, but especially in terms of solar. We have seen in the last 3 years the cost of solar is halved, and we expect another significant decline very soon. Why this happened? Because again, China, learning by doing. Today in the world, 6 out of 10 solar panels manufactured in the world are Chinese manufacturers, making it cheaper and cheaper. It is the reason why I'm saying new Chinese direction, clean energy technologies mean maybe big reduction in the advanced energy technologies. It may be, we talk about solar today, it can be CCUS tomorrow, or electric cars the day after. Again, learning by doing is the keyword here. So the increasing share of renewables as a result of decline in the cost is a very good news for our climate, is a very good news for air pollution, good news for energy security in general because they are homemade domestic resources, but it also creates some challenges coming from the very nature of solar and wind. How do we integrate these two very valuable resources which are depending on the weather to our electricity systems in the best way so that if there is a change in the weather, we are not caught by surprise? How do we integrate the renewables in our electricity systems, an area that the IEA is working very hard. And again, one of your colleagues from Imperial College is employed in our division looking at that very issue. But this is a trend. Renewables are growing and very strongly, and the bulk of the growth in the electricity generation coming from renewables in the world. I would like to go to another technology which we don't talk much as the energy community, but I think it is very important to highlight at least one trend, which is nuclear power. United States has been the leader of nuclear power capacity almost 60 years when it was first came to the picture. But in the United States, like many Western countries, not all of them, many Western countries, the nuclear fleet is aging, and there is very little appetite to build new nuclear power plants and even having extension of their lifetimes with the current context. The same is happening, for example, where I live in France. France is known to be a nuclear country, and in France also it is aging. Very few additions are coming, but the aging is so much that the retirements will be so significant that this is also going to go down substantially. This has many implications. What are we going to replace nuclear with? This is gas or renewables or whatever it is, from that question to the other questions. But there is another issue that not everybody is saying slowly but surely to nuclear power, which is, in my view, is the not right way, in my personal view. But some countries like China is going very strongly. Only in our view, 6 or 7 years of time, China will be the #1 nuclear power in the world, overtaking the United States. And what does this mean? This means many things, but at least one of them I can tell you, that like in the solar case, but solar was expensive, difficult to, it was difficult to reach or access by many low-income countries, and now it is becoming cheaper and everybody is now making more use of solar power. With the nuclear, one of the challenges with nuclear is that it is the first capital cost is very high. But China, again, by learning by doing, may well bring the cost down, which is in fact what they are doing, and one shouldn't be surprised that if China very soon becomes a key nuclear energy technology exporting country, challenging several established nuclear technology exporters in the world, such as US, such as Japan, such as some of the European countries. This is one of the implications of this very picture. But of course, this is based on the current policies. Perhaps the US government and Europeans or Japanese may well give a second look at their nuclear policies and try to see whether or not there may be some benefit of keeping a share for nuclear power in their electricity mix. I mentioned to you that no country is an energy island. So I want to give you one example here. This is the electricity capacity of different countries in the world today and the growth to 2040. In Europe, we discuss a lot. So I just came here a few hours ago from Brussels. What we discuss in Brussels is the share of renewables. It is what kind of policies we should have. It is going to be 17% or 18% or 16%, what kind of, within the current context, or the share of gas within the current context. But India, in 20 years of time, is adding 1 Europe, equal to 1 Europe, and completely new Europe in 20 years. That is equal to current capacity of Europe. And what India will choose will affect all. We are in Europe, think of the share of the current capacity, 1% higher, 2% lower, but they're adding 1 Europe completely. It's not finished. China is adding 1 United States in 20 years of time. And in US, we discussed the Clean Air Act. Is it going to call 1% down, renewables 2% up? But China alone will add 1 United States. What US has built in the last, 50, 60 years, China will add, in addition to what they have now. Therefore, the choices that will be made in New Delhi or in Beijing will affect all of us through technology, through cost, through emissions. You all know much better than me, 1 ton of CO2 going to atmosphere from Shanghai or from Leeds or from Detroit or from Oslo, it has the same impact on all of us. So therefore, the choices there are extremely, extremely important. And it is very important that we engage with those countries to make the right choices. It is the reason why we just talked in the beginning, the International Energy Agency now opened the doors of the IEA to those countries and brought them, China, India, Brazil, as one of our most dynamic members of our board. Ambassador Shorak is with us here. He knows very well that we now engage with those countries on a day-to-day basis. Almost every week, 1 expert from IEA is in Beijing or in New Delhi, or more than 1, in fact, to talk with the governments. We are working with the Chinese government to build their 2050 climate and energy strategies, how they are going to design their emission trading scheme, how they fit in the electricity system. Therefore, the decisions taken there are extremely important for all of us, not only for them, but for all of us. So, electricity is growing very strongly. What are the drivers of the strong electricity demand growth? Of course, industry sector, but a very important driver of electricity sector is the air conditioners. In my view, this is one of the blind spots of the electricity markets, and we are coming very soon with a report. My colleagues are working on that. The importance of air conditioners in the electricity world. The efficiency measures there. How it is affecting the entire electricity system, especially with the increasing income levels in China, India, Middle East. It's a major driver of electricity demand growth, and you will see the numbers. They are really, really very impressive. So electric cars, of course, are also driving the electricity demand growth. They are growing very strongly, and as a result of that, we are seeing electrification is a key driver of our total energy demand growth. Now, I wanted to highlight one issue which I believe is of critical importance strategically for foreign policy, for stability, economic stability, and political stability of the world on the base of these trends, which is the following. There are many economies in the world today which we can call simplified single product economies, whose economic well-being is depending on the oil and gas revenues. Some Middle East countries, Russia, Venezuela, Nigeria, their economy is based on the revenues they got when they export oil and gas. There are many countries like that. And we think it is now the high time for them to think twice for the following reasons. One, because of the shale revolution, the amount of oil and gas those countries in Middle East, in Russia and elsewhere, they will be exporting in the future will be much less than what they thought before, because there is the other exporter. They will have to share the market with them. So less volumes, less quantities are exported. This is number one, big hit. Second hit, as a result of the lots of oil and gas coming from the shale revolution, there will be a downward pressure on the prices. So prices will be lower. Not only volumes will be lower, they export, but the price of the oil and gas will be lower. Therefore, multiplying these two, their revenues will be lower from oil and gas exports. It is the reason why we had in Saudi Arabia last year a recession for the first time since 15 years. Third problem, advanced energy technologies eating up the share of oil and gas more and more. Solar in India fighting with gas, competing with gas. Electric cars, a challenge for the growth of oil demand, and many other technologies. So these are also important threats to those countries' revenues in the future. So it is the reason we believe those economies that are based on the oil and gas export revenues will be in major difficulty in the medium and longer term. It is the high time for them to broaden their economic basis, diversify their economies, and make the necessary economic reforms. And it is the very reason that this year's World Energy Outlook will focus on this very issue. It is a very critical issue because in many of those countries, the economic and political system is based on the revenues coming from oil and gas exports. Exports come, economy grow, subsidies are distributed. If it is cut, it can have implications beyond economy. So it is the reason why we are focusing on that. If our colleagues in the Imperial would like to see us these results, we will be very happy to report to you the results of our work carried out with the colleagues from those countries. Another preoccupation of the IEA, and many of the colleagues would remember is, and again to Nasir, I'm sure she will remember, since 15 years we have a idée fixe, if I say so in French, so it's an obsession, which is the following. We say about energy, but millions of people have no access to electricity in the world. And 15 years ago we have started, people say so many people have no access to electricity, but if you take a problem seriously, you first measure it. How many people have no access to electricity? We started in the year 2002, and every year we look at this issue. As of today, 1.1 billion people have no access to electricity. Where are the problems? Problems are in India, in the rest of Asia, but mainly in sub-Saharan Africa. But when we look at the trends, we see that India is fixing this problem. Prime Minister Modi took access to electricity issue as a serious priority for its government, and very soon we will see in a few years of time everybody in India will have access to electricity. I think for me it's a huge success. You may like this or that, but it's a huge success to have access to electricity. The problem will remain a problem of sub-Saharan Africa. Still, with the current rates, despite the improvements here and there, in sub-Saharan Africa, in 2030, there will be 600 million people having no access to electricity. And this is a big shame. This is a big shame. And to be honest with you, it is such a big shame because we talk about the solar energy and wind energy. In Africa, we have 325 days of very strong radiation of solar, and the costs are coming down. We have huge hydropower potential. We have a huge solar energy push in Germany, where the sun is much less than in Africa. This is something that is very much at the heart of the IEA's interests. Especially we work with the Sustainable Development Goals, we are United Nations with those African countries, and it is very important to bring the African policymakers with the industry to take the right steps. It's an area that we are focusing with many African countries, because it is not the economics now, it is the political will. Because you have the solar, you have the hydropower, you have natural gas in East of Africa, huge amount, Mozambique, Tanzania, and the others, but this is not happening mainly because of the political will or ability not to be able to do so, or sometimes for other reasons it is not working. Now, last part of my remarks is a key challenge for all of us coming from energy sector, which is climate change. Energy sector is at the heart of the climate change debate because, as you know, a big chunk of the emissions come from the energy sector. Without fixing the problem in the energy sector, we have no chance whatsoever to fix our climate problem. We have been years and years at the IEA providing a roadmap for the governments, for the industry, how we can reach our 2 degrees target. And we are very happy that many governments and even energy industry using our numbers, our analysis as a basis for their decisions. But this year, we made a small change. More than we made a significant change in our thinking. We said, that's true. To reach the climate target is a very important objective of the human being. But there are 2 other important objectives that we have to reach as the energy sector, as the people who work on energy. What are the other 2, in addition to climate change? One of them is reaching universal worldwide electricity access. Everybody has access to electricity. This is, in my view, as decent, as important as climate change. Third one, to reduce the local pollution in the cities. This is a major problem in many emerging countries, believe me. I mean, if you go to China, India, Indonesia, Thailand, this is their main preoccupation. How do I reduce the emissions in my city? So we thought to bring these 3 important objectives together, reaching the 2 degrees target, universal electricity access, and also reduction of air pollution in the cities, what kind of roadmap we can bring to the world. So this is the climate change, achieving universal energy access, and also improve air quality. And we were very happy that we get a buy-in from major emerging countries, many international bodies, and we are going to, on September 17th of April, we are going to present this to the United Nations, in the General Assembly, to all the delegations together with Secretary General of United Nations, as we believe this is very much in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Reaching our climate targets, nobody left behind in terms of electricity access and improving the air quality. And of course, the most important one being the, perhaps for many of us, to reach our 2 degrees target. Because with the current policies, which are agreed in Paris, the NDCs, the temperature increase is close to 3 degrees Celsius, which is definitely not possible. And is it possible to reach the Sustainable Development Targets? Yes, but the efforts need to be multiplied by 2 in terms of efficiency. Much more gas, for example, need to replace coal in many countries. Solar capacity needs to grow much stronger, and more electric vehicles need to replace the internal combustion engines we have. So efforts need to be multiplied in tremendous terms, and to do that, we need, of course, strong political will from the governments, which I believe is not here today. Economics are working in many cases, but the economics alone, declining cost of clean technologies, is not enough to come to 2 degrees. It is much better than what we thought 5-6 years ago, where the world would go. But there is an improvement, but still 3 degrees is not a way that our fragile equilibrium of our planet can take it. So therefore, huge efforts additional efforts are needed here. Now, to finish our energy and climate thoughts to share it with you, we think the shale revolution in the United States will shake the established order of oil and gas worldwide, the market dynamics, the trade flows, energy security, and geopolitics of energy in big time. Gas is going to grow strongly, especially in Asia, China and India, in many cases replacing coal. But there are 2 issues for the gas industry. We are very careful to underline them. One, gas price spikes can reverse the trend, because there's a coal-gas competition in Asia. Higher gas prices may well mean that the cheap coal will have important inroads once again. The other one is gas is, of course, better than coal in many cases, but gas is not a completely innocent fuel, especially during the production and transportation of gas if there are methane leaks, leakage of methane, the flaring, venting of methane, and this can be fixed just by using the right technologies. And you don't need to discover the new technology with the existing technologies, but you have to take the right measures there. So these are the 2 challenges in front of the gas industry. Otherwise, we see the future of gas being rather bright. China will continue to shape the global energy trends, and this time it is going to push on the clean energy technology side, and we think this drive, this push can further bring the cost of advanced technologies down, providing better opportunities for them internationally to be much stronger. We think, as the IEA, climate change is at the heart of our interest, but in order to, since it's a universal issue, in order to get everybody on board, we have to look at the concerns and preoccupations of other countries, especially emerging countries, and look climate change together with the universal electricity access and at the same time air pollution issues. And I can tell you that unlike some other people think, universal energy access will not shoot up our CO2 emissions worldwide, as our analysis show. And electrification and digitalization is on one hand making our energy system more efficient, but create new challenges. As I mentioned, integration of renewables in the electric system is one issue, and another issue is the cybersecurity. If electricity is becoming the heart of our social lives, economic lives, in the electricity cut, hospitals, our communication, I don't know, the transportation sector, they will be all affected. Therefore, cybersecurity becomes an issue. And as such, IEA, which has been established as an oil security organization, is now also looking at the gas security and the electricity security much more closely with our governments and related organizations. Once again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much again, Fatih. As you can see, I'm not Martin. We're doing a Grantham and Energy Futures Lab double header between us, so I'm going to chair the Q&A. Now, just to remind you, as Martin said, we are recording this. It will go onto the internet and stay there somewhere for all of eternity. So with that in mind, would you please say who you are and where you're from? And if you're a student here, that's terrific. Tell us that as well. I'm going to gather up 2 or 3 questions at a time. Please keep them reasonably succinct. And please, let's have a few hands in the air for people to ask them. So I've got, I have 2 women here and a gentleman towards the back, and I'll just take them in this order, please. So can you just hold on for a tick? There's a roving mic coming. Sorry, it was the front row first, I think, if that's okay, and then we'll go back and then back. So thank you.
Hello, sorry, I've lost my voice a bit. So.
No,
okay, microphone close.
I was wondering, with your modelling that you did of the sustainable
scenario,
when you did that, did you take into account and consideration the emissions that would happen from the manufacturing side, from the solar panels and all the cars, and that side of it when you're doing the models? Because that would be quite a big impact. Thank you.
Okay, just pass the mic back. Thanks. Tell us who you are.
My name is Anna Kore. I'm a professor of environmental engineering here at the college, and thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I noticed that when you were discussing about electrification, we did not see at all Latin America featuring in any of your graphs. And of course, here at the college, we have the Sustainable Gas Institute, which is very important to us, and the college has very good links with Brazil. I was wondering if there is a reason why such a big geographic region is not included. Thank you.
That's great. And we'll just take John, who's just a few rows back.
John Gibbons, University of Sheffield and UK CCS Research Centre. To get down to the 2040 emission levels, there's a lot of coal has got to go. It's mainly coal that's getting cut, and a lot of that will have to be in China.
Yeah.
And as a result, China really takes quite a, for its size, a relatively small share of the cumulative emissions over that period. Do you think it'll do it? Because it can definitely clean up its coal plants to cut emissions in the cities. It's got the technology.
One more question.
Do you want one more? Okay. Let's go over in this direction. Is there somebody hiding behind the pillar? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Zeynep Kurban from Energy Futures Lab. I wanted to ask a question about that very worrying graph you showed of US production and use of oil and gas. To what degree do you take account of policy and the price of PV being so competitive and possibly even becoming cheaper when showing that increase in the use of oil and gas?
Great. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Okay. So let me go first of all with this question. Yes, When we look at the emissions, we take into consideration the manufactured emissions from the manufacturing sector, as you mentioned, the manufacturing in particular, but industry in general is a major contributor to the CO2 emissions. And as such, it is part of our modeling work. Latin America, are you from Latin America?
No, but we have very many students here at the college from that region.
Perfect. So even you are not from Latin America is very important. We look at all the regions of the world, and Latin America also very important in terms of electrification. But electricity access today is not a major problem in Latin America. Brazil, for example, made a huge program, brought electricity to everybody in a very short period of time. Again, the Light for All is the name of the program in Brazil. But Latin America is definitely, it is in our numbers, in our book. We look at all the regions, all the countries in the world, and Brazil is definitely one of the areas that we are focusing. But to be honest with you, we do not see the dynamism in the electricity sector in Latin America what we see in India and China today. In Brazil, there is a strong now push for the gas market reform, which we are working with the Brazilian government, but still it is in the preliminary stage. But Brazil, if you want me to talk about Brazil, I can tell you one thing which I admire in Brazil is the following. Brazil is the only country in the world, which has been a huge oil importer and turning to be an oil exporter as a result of two things. One, very strong offshore finds and offshore production. And second, more importantly, biofuels program. So biofuels is used more and more for transportation sector and replace the domestic oil consumption. And as a result of that, Brazil is today one of the most important exporter of oil in the world, changed the destiny of the countries. This is why I'm saying is that government policies are critical. Biofuels program for Brazil was a government policy. It does work and it can change the market dynamics when rightly designed. But electricity in Latin America will grow strongly, but perhaps not the rate that we would like to see. Now, our colleague from the CCS unit, CCS work from the university, will China make it? I hope so. This is, I should tell you. But it's a big, big, big challenge. In the absence of the, today, I mean, we, on Thursday, I should tell you, we are going to come up with a major report. What happened in the world last year? In the entire world, in the CO2 emissions in different countries. There are many surprises there, you will see. Please look at the FT and other newspapers. China's coal consumption is very important for all of us because China uses the half of the world's coal. 50% of the coal in the world is in China, other 50% the rest of the world. Last year, 2 years ago, everybody was happy that the Chinese coal consumption went down by 1%, 2%. But let's don't forget that Chinese electricity comes today close to 2/3 still from coal. And now, what are we going to do that? Plus, not only in China, in Asia, coal fleet is very young. Young meaning they are far from the retirement age. So the only solution, what I see here, from an angle where we are as the IEA, we are pushing it and working very hard, and the CCUS, I see, is the only way that we will see we reach those targets in 2040 with the 2 degrees. Without it, it is impossible. There are many colleagues here, young colleagues, if I can give them a, depending on how they see the global energy issues, a pessimistic, or if you wish, a realistic number. I may well be the oldest here, perhaps competing with my good friend John Mitchell here. In the year 1987, 30 years ago, the United Secretary General at that time asked the former Norwegian Prime Minister, Mrs. Brundtland, I don't know if anybody remembers Mr. Brundtland, to make a report on sustainable development. She made the report. 1987, and the sustainable development, the name, the concept came for the first time in 1987, and the main idea was at that time to bring the share of fossil fuels lower in the global energy mix 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, the share of fossil fuels in the global energy mix was 81%, 81. Oil plus coal plus gas, 81% 30 years ago. In the last 30 years, many things happened. The renewables, as you saw, became cheaper, new technologies, more efficiently. Governments became much more environmentally oriented. The citizens became more climate change awareness is everywhere. The green parties everywhere. Even the conservative parties became green. Green parties became conservative. There's a lot of things happening. 30 years. And now, this 81% 30 years ago share of fossil fuels, after all these changes today, came to 81%. No change. So fossil fuels are stubborn for many reasons: economics, convenience, this and that, blah, blah. So therefore, of course, we need to bring the share of fossil fuels down. In our scenarios, we see down. But in the absence of CCUS, I don't know how we are going to fix this problem in the absence of that. And it is the very reason that we think it's a critical technology. But if you don't like CCUS, then find another solution. We cannot fix all of these problems with renewables only. Renewables will be the main driver of the solution, but only 100% renewables will make it much more difficult if you cannot find a solution to replace the fossil fuels. And this is what I want to say. I am sure there are different views on that we can discuss. Our colleague over there talking about the oil and gas versus PV. Yes, solar PV is getting cheaper, and it will be the main source of new power plants, electricity generation. But currently, oil we use for petrochemicals, for trucks, for cars, for jets. It is very difficult to replace oil with solar energy in those end users. We are far from that. So therefore, we need oil at least for some time to fuel our economies so that we are not in trouble. But PV is coming very strongly, but from very, very low shares in the global energy mix. So perhaps we can go for a second round of questions.
Absolutely. Yes, please. Good. Hands are springing up. So we've got a microphone on that side. So let me just take, there's a gentleman at the back there, and then a woman slightly to the, so he's right. Can you wave again? Because otherwise I don't know where to give the mic. Yeah, give him the mic. And then brightly coloured hair lady. And then we'll take two down towards the front row here, if that's okay. And hopefully we'll bring some more of you in shortly. So yeah, let's go, please.
Abdurrahim Assab from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. First, thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. Going back to natural gas, you mentioned that there is an important shift to gas from coal that is necessary, and you mentioned two barriers, which is the potential spike in prices and the issue of methane. How do you see the role of government in preventing these, let's say, negative price dynamics, and also in addressing the methane issues? Thank you.
Yep, I'm just getting this one so that it's not too much. That's fine.
Hi, my name is Luciana. I'm a PhD student at the Grantham Institute. And I wanted to ask you, so in addition to the gentleman who asked about CCS and its role, I wanted to also ask what your thoughts are on end-use energy efficiency improvements and whether there needs to be more concerted action from governments on that as well.
He didn't ask about CCS, by the way. I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about CCS. Yeah.
Okay, and then so then we have our two questions here, and they have the mic.
Okay, my name is Beth Mitchell, and I'm an independent research analyst. You mentioned earlier on that the signals are quite confusing, and also I understand the timescales are very long for a number of these investments. What would your advice be to companies or governments making very long life cycle investments in such an uncertain set of circumstances? Thank you.
Okay, and just to your left, my right. Yeah, thank you.
So, my name is Mashoud Haider from alumni from the school, work within project financing. So it's perhaps an extension of a few of the questions. The role of the private sector in investing these, and how do you give them the confidence in managing the merchant risk associated with that?
Thank you.
Okay. Now, first of all, the first question about natural gas and role of governments. In terms of if a government wants to see natural gas has a bigger role than gas, it has to make the life of gas easier in terms of competition, first of all. If it is not a regulation. In China, it is a regulation. Government said, as of this day, we don't use coal at home, full stop. But it doesn't work everywhere, especially in UK. I think it doesn't work like that.
It did for a few decades.
Okay, but not anymore. So, but the best way is, of course, in an ideal world, to have a carbon price, carbon tax. But I don't see it will happen from one day to another universally. China is trying to introduce this, the emission trading scheme I mentioned to you, that we are working with the Chinese government, with the NDRC, the National Development Reform Commission. This is one way. The second way is to put a tax or a similar issue in terms of air pollution, and some countries are doing that. When it comes to the methane leakage, it is very easy. Put a regulation. Put strict regulations. There are countries who did it in a perfect way. For example, Canada is one example. US is doing a very good issue. They work with the EPA, and I think there is a need, especially with the shale gas revolution, to address the venting and flaring. Otherwise, the benefits of natural gas will not be so high compared to coal if we are not able to fix the methane problem. Energy efficiency, end-user energy efficiency. This is a critical subject. As I mentioned, we see fighting against climate change, two major pillars are renewables and energy efficiency. And today we see, unfortunately, energy efficiency efforts are weakening and weakening, especially in a low energy price environment. When the prices go down, the desire of the governments to use energy efficiently and the policies they put there are not as strong as when the prices are high. There are many areas that we think is a huge problem, but I can give you at least one example, which is not very well known, but such an important thing. You know, buildings. Buildings are very important in terms of the energy use, both in terms of heating and in terms of cooling and in terms of lighting. And when you build a building in Europe, for example, there are building codes. You build according to that so that you keep energy, you save energy. But today, according to our work, 2 out of 3 buildings constructed today in the world, they have 0 building codes, efficiency codes. And when you build a building, it will be with you, I don't know, 50, 60 years. You lock in the infrastructure there. And therefore, the lack of efficiency standards, minimum efficiency standards, is a major issue. Another one I mentioned by passing when I talk, the air conditioners. We will come to it in a moment. Air condition efficiency standards are much more important than building a lot of power plants. We will announce this in May. So therefore, from our point of view, and it's a key issue for the IEA, we consider energy efficiency is the first fuel, followed by the other fuels we consider as a fuel, is extremely important. Now, the 2 last questions, I can combine them. What to do for the private sector to make the investments? It's an uncertain environment. You are completely right. Environment is very uncertain for the private companies. And why do we build a private company? To be very frank, there are many investors here, from oil companies, gas companies, private investors. 99% companies are there to maximize their profits rather than saving the world, very frankly. And this is why they are built. It is the It is the profit maximization. 99% and 1% is in this room, of course. The issue is here how to bring them to make the right investments. They can make profit, but at the same time, they feel comfortable with the certainty of the investments, and they serve the goals of addressing climate change and other issues. Very few governments are able to do that. When they do it, as we have seen in some examples, clean energy technologies, we were very, very successful. But when I look at globally, there is still big uncertainty in many investments. And when it comes to energy sector, the lifetime of the investments are very long, and you need to wait a lot to get the returns back. Therefore, it's becoming riskier and riskier. And for example, it is the reason why it is in the oil business, oil and gas, more and more money goes to short cycle investments rather than the long-term investments, which is of course something very, very worrying when you look at the long-term trends. And the investments like the CCS, in my view, nuclear power, the upfront high capital cost is not getting government attention, and as such, the investment is not going there with the current government framework. So I am representing an intergovernmental organization. I believe the importance of the public policy, and here there is a very strong role for the governments to correct the market failure and push the investments in the right direction. But it is not happening now.
Okay.
If you want to make one final round, I have a train tomorrow at 5:40 to Eurostar to Paris.
We are running up against our allotted time, but yes. Let's just pick up a few more questions. My wonderful chairing has meant that both the microphones have ended up on the same side of the room. So maybe if you could pass one of them. So if we could just take by the pillar there, Judith, and then can we just pass the other microphone across to the chap with his hand up in the middle of the room, and then if that mic can head out that way afterwards, and then we'll just take one more on the same row here. So that's great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judith Ward from Sustainability First. Would you care to say something about how you see storage fitting into the picture, which I think perhaps you haven't touched on?
Great. And then to the middle there.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Copson from Bbox, which is a London off-grid energy company, but mostly based in sub-Saharan Africa. I was wondering if you could briefly unpack your kind of pessimistic forecast around sub-Saharan African access, and with kind of off-grid technologies, what you think the main hindrance there for those technologies to really bend that curve downwards. Thanks.
Okay, very good. And our final question, thanks.
Hi, my name is Krista Haltinen. I'm a student here at Imperial. Could you just briefly mention how your research takes into account the effect that climate change has on energy generation technologies, and whether the need to adapt energy generation to climate change features in this analysis? Thank you.
Okay, super. Very good questions. Thank you very much indeed.
That's all? Okay.
I think that's it, yep. I have one of my own.
It's enough. If you want, please go ahead, yes.
How long do you think the US can maintain its position in production of unconventionals?
Okay, perfect. So let me start with the storage. I think it was in one of the slides I mentioned in the bottom of the slide. It is a very critical technology if we want to even make more use of the renewable technologies. And we all want to do it because of electricity security issues, because using the full potential of renewables, especially for solar and wind. But the cost is going down, definitely, but we are not yet there to see a major penetration of storage in the electricity markets. There are some improvements in different countries. Australia is one example, some European countries are an example. In the United States, there are some improvements, and I can tell you, when we look at the research and development budget, where it is going, storage R&D takes a big chunk of it. Very hopeful, but we are still not yet there. Off-grid, Sub-Saharan Africa off-grid is definitely the way to go, as we have discussed in our World Energy Outlook. And thanks to the lower cost of renewables, solar and wind and hydropower, and thanks to the slightly but surely growing government will, we may well change those numbers. But the political will is important. And the fact that the Sub-Saharan Africa, more or less the same level of people are having no access to electricity shouldn't mislead you, because the population of Sub-Saharan Africa is increasing substantially. There are many people are gaining electricity in Sub-Saharan Africa, but the population is growing, therefore still some people are there. What needs to be done is the government policies, more than the economics of it, need to change. And Africa can do something which we have not experienced in the history of energy, which is the following. When you look at China, when you look at Europe, when you look at US, their history of energy, they all started with coal. The main electric generation was coal, moved to gas, some of them, and then they are moving to renewables for the electricity fleet. But in Sub-Saharan Africa, we may well, for the first time in the history, skip this coal phase and directly go to the renewable technologies. Again, hydropower, don't forget the hydropower, solar and wind, and off-grid is the main way to go, as we have described. But for this, again, government policies are key. In the absence of determined government policies, the cheap cost of solar alone will not be enough. There are some business models in different micro examples, but Africa is a big continent. We need much more collective efforts there. Do we take into consideration the impact of climate change in our energy projections? Definitely so. And one of the reasons why we have the growing needs for cooling is as a result of what we see, the impacts of climate change in our numbers. Cooling, refrigeration, these are all growing needs as a result of climate change in our projections. And we also look at the impacts on the offshore energy production as a result of climate change. Finally, the question about the United States, how long US oil and gas shale revolution can go. In terms of gas, the resources are huge and they are growing, and the productivity and the technological improvement is very, very strong, and as such, we don't see in the next 20 years a slowing down of gas production growth. But in terms of oil, within the next 10 years of time, unless new resources are discovered, we will see that the production of shale oil in the United States will flatten out. But this is unless, as I said, new resources are not discovered, and which may well be the case that with the new technologies, they discover new resources or make more of the resources which are already discovered in the United States. But 10 years is a long time, and US has surprised many people in terms of the resilience of their oil and gas industry. They may surprise once again, and if they surprise us, I believe the surprise will be rather on the upward revision of those numbers rather than downward revision of those numbers. So with these words, I wanted to finish today, if you agree with me. But if I want to finish my verse by saying you that the trends I describe you, most of those trends are not necessarily in line with our climate targets we agreed in Paris. And there is a need, of course, the market conditions, the declining cost of renewables are very important, but we need, in my view, above everything, strong government policies to push the energy world in the right direction, changing from pushing more and more research and development activities, especially for the advanced technologies, or providing financial incentives for the right technologies to have penetration of them in the energy sector. If we leave everything to the market developments, I should say that I am really not an optimistic person that we can reach our goals we established in Paris. And thank you very much for your attention once again. Thank you.
Thank you.